My hands trembled as I sprinted through sterile hospital corridors after receiving the devastating call about Sarah's accident. 3 agonizing days of coma ended when she finally opened her eyes, but instead of relief, I felt terror. She stared at me like a complete stranger, immediately requesting divorce papers and her phone back. The doctor explained possible memory loss, but something felt wrong when Sarah remembered her coffee order perfectly while forgetting our wedding anniversary. When the nurse mentioned Sarah's Tinder notifications, my world crumbled. Was this elaborate amnesia actually fake? The inconsistencies in Sarah's memory loss became impossible to ignore within 24 hours of her awakening. I decided to document everything, keeping detailed notes on my phone about what she remembered versus what she claimed to forget. The pattern that emerged challenged every medical explanation Dr. Peterson had offered about retrograde amnesia and selective memory loss. Tuesday morning brought the most glaring contradiction. Sarah rattled off her social security number, bank PIN, and work computer passwords without hesitation when the hospital billing department needed insurance information. She provided these details with mechanical precision, accessing frequently used data effortlessly. But when I gently asked about our wedding rings, she examined her gold band like seeing it for the first time. She claimed no memory of selecting it together at Morrison's jewelry store downtown, no recollection of my nervous proposal speech, no awareness that we'd saved 8 months to afford matching sets. Our golden retriever Bailey provided the next crucial test. When Linda brought Bailey for a brief afternoon visit, Sarah's face lit up with genuine joy. She called him by name, immediately scratched behind his ears exactly where he loved it most, and even remembered his favorite treats were hidden in the kitchen pantry. But when I mentioned that we'd adopted Bailey together from the animal shelter 3 years ago, she insisted she'd always had him as a single woman, living alone. I began conducting subtle memory tests, carefully weaving false information into conversations to see if she'd accept fabricated details. When I mentioned our supposed trip to Hawaii last Christmas, Sarah nodded enthusiastically, asking about beaches we'd never visited. She readily agreed when I described a romantic dinner at Romano's restaurant that didn't exist anywhere in our city. Most disturbing, she completely accepted my fictional story about us meeting at a cooking class, despite the fact that we'd actually met at a mutual friend's birthday party 5 years earlier. Her selective amnesia became suspicious when she demonstrated perfect recall about Jake Morrison, her college boyfriend from 7 years ago. She remembered Jake's birthday, his favorite sports teams, specific arguments they'd had during their relationship. She could describe Jake's old apartment in detail, recall their breakup conversation, word for word, and knew he was currently working as an accountant in Denver. For someone claiming total memory loss about significant relationships, she maintained crystal clear recollections about her previous romantic partner. The most damning evidence emerged when I searched our home computer while Sarah remained hospitalized for additional observation. Buried in her browser history, I discovered weeks of research about memory loss symptoms, legal grounds for divorce, and most shocking of all, multiple visits to Wells Family Law Firm's website. According to timestamps, Sarah had been researching divorce attorneys for 3 weeks before her supposed accident. Phone records revealed even more disturbing details. Sarah had contacted attorney Amanda Wells numerous times recently, including a 43-minute conversation just 2 days before her accident. When I called the law firm pretending to be a potential client, the receptionist accidentally confirmed that Sarah Williams had scheduled multiple consultations with Ms. Wells regarding dissolution of marriage proceedings. My wife wasn't suffering from genuine amnesia. She was executing a carefully planned escape strategy, using fake memory loss as a weapon to end our marriage, while positioning herself as the victim of medical circumstances beyond her control. The realization hit me like a physical blow, leaving me struggling to breathe in the hospital parking garage where I'd retreated to process this devastating betrayal. Sarah wasn't just leaving me, she was destroying me with surgical precision, making me question my own sanity, while she played the role of a confused innocent victim, deserving sympathy and legal protection. Every moment of tender concern I'd felt during her coma, every prayer I'd whispered for her recovery, every tear I'd shed in those plastic hospital chairs had been based on loving someone who no longer existed. The woman in that hospital bed wearing Sarah's face had become a stranger with malicious intent, and I needed to discover exactly how deep her deception went. Faced with mounting evidence of Sarah's elaborate deception, I made the difficult decision to hire a private investigator. Marcus Torres came highly recommended by a colleague whose own divorce had required professional assistance uncovering hidden assets and secret activities. Marcus specialized in matrimonial investigations, and his preliminary background check on Sarah would reveal details that shattered any remaining hope for an innocent explanation. Marcus requested 3 days to compile a comprehensive report about Sarah's recent activities and associations. During this agonizing waiting period, I maintained the pretense of a concerned, loving husband visiting Sarah daily at the hospital. She continued her amnesia performance flawlessly, asking me to explain basic details about our life together, while simultaneously demonstrating intimate knowledge of personal information no stranger could possibly know. She knew exactly where we kept spare house keys, remembered the security code for our home alarm system, and could navigate our living room layout perfectly, despite claiming no memory of ever living there. When insurance representatives called requiring policy numbers and coverage details, Sarah provided accurate information without hesitation. Yet she supposedly couldn't remember our honeymoon in Savannah or the anniversary dinner where we'd discussed buying a house together. When Marcus finally called with his findings, his voice carried the weight of someone delivering devastating news. He requested we meet at his downtown office rather than discussing such sensitive information over the phone. That Friday afternoon meeting would expose the full scope of Sarah's elaborate deception, revealing months of careful planning that went far beyond simple marital dissatisfaction. Marcus spread a thick folder across his desk containing surveillance photographs, financial records, and documented evidence of Sarah's activities leading up to her supposed accident. The first revelation involved Dr. Patricia Hoffman, a therapist Sarah claimed she'd never heard of when I'd asked about counseling options during her recovery. According to appointment records Marcus had obtained through legal channels, Sarah had been seeing Dr. Hoffman twice weekly for the past 4 months. Dr. Hoffman specialized in helping clients develop emotional detachment strategies for ending difficult relationships without guilt or emotional complications. Session notes revealed Sarah's systematic work on disconnecting from our marriage, practicing techniques for suppressing attachment and building psychological walls against shared experiences. Most chilling, she'd specifically requested guidance on achieving complete emotional separation from a spouse without arousing suspicion about her changing feelings. The surveillance photographs told an even more disturbing story. Marcus had obtained security footage from various locations around our city, showing Sarah engaging in what could only be described as rehearsal behavior for her planned amnesia performance. Coffee shop cameras captured her sitting alone at corner tables, practicing confused facial expressions in window reflections while studying her own reactions. Parking garage security systems recorded her walking between cars, stopping periodically to look around with exaggerated bewilderment, testing different levels of convincing confusion. One particularly damning video showed Sarah at Riverside Park, sitting on a bench while methodically going through her purse contents. She would remove items like her driver's license and credit card, study them with puzzled expressions, then repeat the process with different objects. Marcus explained this appeared to be rehearsal for the selective memory loss she would later claim practicing. Which items she should recognize versus which ones should confuse her. She was literally training herself to maintain consistent gaps in her fabricated amnesia, ensuring her performance would seem medically plausible to doctors and family members. Financial records revealed the most shocking betrayal yet. 3 days before her accident, Sarah had withdrawn $30,000 from our joint savings account. This money represented years of careful budgeting for our dream house down payment funds we'd accumulated through shared sacrifice and financial discipline. Bank security cameras showed Sarah conducting this transaction with calm determination, displaying no signs of confusion or memory problems that would supposedly afflict her just days later. Marcus saved the most devastating evidence for last. Text message records between Sarah and her sister Linda exposed the true nature of the car accident that had supposedly triggered her amnesia. These messages, obtained through legal discovery processes available to licensed investigators, revealed that Sarah's collision with the delivery truck had been deliberately orchestrated, rather than a random occurrence of tragic fate. According to the text exchanges spanning several weeks, Sarah had identified a specific intersection downtown, where delivery trucks frequently made tight turns at predictable times during afternoon rush hour. She'd spent weeks timing traffic patterns, studying driver behaviors, and calculating the precise moment when a minor collision could occur, with minimal actual injury but maximum insurance and legal benefits for her divorce proceedings. The messages showed her coordinating with Linda about optimal timing, discussing various injury scenarios that would seem serious enough to justify hospitalization, and even practicing her immediate post-accident responses to ensure consistency in her story. Linda had served as both emotional support and practical advisor, helping Sarah plan every detail of her elaborate deception. The final piece of evidence made my hands shake as Marcus presented it. Sarah had recorded herself on her own phone, practicing amnesia conversations and testing different levels of memory confusion to determine what seemed most believable. These recordings, discovered in her cloud storage backup during Marcus's digital investigation, showed her experimenting with various stories about how much she should remember versus forget. She'd literally rehearsed entire conversations about not recognizing me, practiced looking confused when discussing our shared history, and even worked on maintaining consistent gaps in her fabricated memory loss. The recordings captured her, refining her performance, adjusting her responses based on how convincing they sounded, and preparing answers for questions doctors or family members might ask about her condition. As Marcus closed the folder and leaned back in his chair, the full scope of Sarah's betrayal crystallized into sharp, painful focus. This wasn't a sudden emotional breakdown or desperate decision made during a moment of crisis. She'd spent months planning this elaborate escape from our marriage, using my own love and concern as weapons against me while destroying our shared financial future and manipulating everyone who cared about her. Every moment of my anguish during her coma had been orchestrated. Every tear I'd shed over her condition had been manufactured by her deliberate design. The woman I'd loved for 5 years had transformed into someone capable of elaborate fraud, emotional manipulation, and calculated cruelty that extended far beyond simple relationship dissatisfaction. But Marcus had uncovered something else during his investigation, something that would make Sarah's betrayal even more complex and heartbreaking than either of us realized at that moment. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source that Sunday evening. Linda Williams. Sarah's younger sister appeared at my front door, visibly distraught and carrying a manila envelope filled with documents that would change everything I thought I understood about Sarah's motivations. Her hands trembled as she spoke, tears streaming down her cheeks in a way that suggested genuine emotional turmoil rather than rehearsed performance. Linda's confession began with an apology that sent shockwaves through everything I believed about Sarah's elaborate deception. According to Linda, Sarah's amnesia scheme hadn't emerged from simple dissatisfaction with our marriage or random desire for divorce. Instead, it had grown from a devastating misunderstanding that revealed how catastrophically we'd both failed at honest communication during our 5 years together. 3 months earlier, while helping Sarah organize our home office for tax preparation, Linda had discovered hidden paperwork in my desk drawer that I'd never mentioned to my wife. These documents revealed a $20,000 inheritance from my grandfather's estate. Money Sarah knew nothing about because I'd been planning to surprise her with it as a contribution for our dream house down payment on our upcoming anniversary. But Sarah's interpretation of this discovery had been far more sinister than my innocent intentions suggested. Linda explained that Sarah had convinced herself I was hiding assets in preparation for my own secret divorce plans, using the undisclosed inheritance as evidence that I was financially positioning myself to leave her, while ensuring she received minimal support in any settlement proceedings. The inheritance came from my estranged grandfather, Harrison Foster, who died unexpectedly from a heart attack in August after minimal contact with our family for several years. Grandfather Foster and I had maintained limited communication after my grandmother's death, exchanging mainly holiday cards and brief phone calls during birthdays. His sudden passing had shocked everyone, particularly because he'd apparently been updating his will just weeks before his death. The inheritance consisted of stocks and bonds Harrison had accumulated during his 40-year career as an electrical engineer with the county utilities department. He'd specifically designated the money for housing purposes in his will, hoping his grandchildren would use it to establish stable homes for their families rather than frivolous spending. I'd planned to surprise Sarah with this news on our anniversary, presenting her with the inheritance documents and a folder of houses we could now afford with the additional down payment money. Linda's revelation exposed the tragic irony underlying Sarah's entire deception. While Sarah was planning an elaborate fake amnesia scheme because she believed I was hiding money to facilitate divorce, I was actually hiding money to strengthen our marriage and fulfill our shared dream of home ownership. We'd both been keeping significant financial secrets from each other, but for completely opposite reasons that demonstrated our mutual failure at communication. According to Linda, Sarah's discovery of the inheritance documents had triggered intense anxiety and paranoid thinking that had consumed her thoughts for weeks. She'd spent countless hours analyzing our recent conversations, looking for signs that I was preparing to leave her financially vulnerable. She'd misinterpreted my research about mortgage rates and housing markets as evidence I was planning to buy property independently without including her in future plans. My enthusiasm about our future together, which I'd thought was romantic and encouraging, had somehow been twisted in Sarah's mind into preparation for a future without her. Every conversation about financial planning or house hunting had been filtered through her paranoid belief that I was positioning myself for advantageous divorce proceedings, while keeping her ignorant of my true intentions and available resources. Linda admitted she'd initially supported Sarah's defensive planning because she genuinely believed I was deceiving her sister about my financial situation and future intentions. When Sarah had shared the inheritance discovery and her interpretation of its implications, Linda had encouraged her to protect herself financially and legally before I could execute what they both believed were my secret plans for abandonment. She'd even helped research divorce attorneys and had driven Sarah to her initial consultation with Amanda Wells, believing they were protecting an innocent woman from a calculating husband who was hiding assets and planning secret escape strategies. Linda's guilt over her role in enabling Sarah's deception was evident in every word she spoke as she described their planning sessions and strategy discussions. The fake amnesia plan had emerged from Sarah's desperation to avoid direct confrontation about the inheritance while still achieving divorce with maximum financial protection and sympathy from family and friends. In her distorted thinking, claiming memory loss would prevent me from demanding explanations about why she wanted out of our marriage, while positioning her as a victim deserving of support rather than someone abandoning her husband for imaginary reasons. Linda's involvement had included practical support during Sarah's preparation phases, emotional encouragement during her doubts about the plan, and agreement to corroborate parts of Sarah's story if questioned by doctors or investigators. But seeing the genuine anguish in my eyes during hospital visits had gradually convinced Linda that I wasn't a calculating husband, planning secret escape strategies or financial manipulation. As Linda finished her confession and placed the manila envelope on my coffee table, I realized we were dealing with something far more complicated than simple marital betrayal or elaborate fraud. Sarah's deception had grown from real fear and perceived betrayal, even though her fears were based on complete misunderstanding of my intentions and character. Her actions were inexcusable, but the motivations behind them revealed mutual failures in trust and communication. The envelope Linda brought contained copies of all the inheritance paperwork Sarah had discovered, along with her own written account of their conversations and planning sessions over the past several months. Linda hoped this evidence might somehow help us find a path toward truth and possible reconciliation. though she admitted uncertainty about whether forgiveness was possible after such an elaborate betrayal involving fraud and manipulation. But Linda's confession also raised disturbing questions about other people who might be involved in Sarah's scheme, particularly the divorce attorney who had been guiding her through this process and potentially encouraging her illegal activities for personal gain. Armed with Linda's confession and Marcus's investigation results, I decided to confront attorney Amanda Wells directly about her role in Sarah's elaborate deception. Her law office occupied the 15th floor of the prestigious Hamilton building downtown, and her receptionist grudgingly agreed to squeeze me in for a brief consultation that Tuesday afternoon. I expected a routine legal discussion about Sarah's case, but what transpired would reveal another layer of manipulation and professional corruption. Amanda Wells projected an image of polished professionalism when I arrived at her corner office, which was decorated with expensive furniture and legal awards displayed prominently on mahogany shelves. She appeared to be a woman in her early 40s with meticulously styled auburn hair and designer clothing that suggested considerable financial success in her legal practice. But beneath her professional exterior, I would soon discover someone willing to exploit vulnerable clients for personal gain. Our conversation began normally enough with Amanda explaining client confidentiality restrictions that prevented her from discussing specific details about Sarah's case without proper authorization. She outlined general approaches to divorce proceedings involving medical complications and discussed how amnesia might affect property division and custody arrangements in hypothetical situations. Her responses seemed knowledgeable and professional. But when I mentioned possessing evidence of Sarah's fake amnesia, Amanda's demeanor shifted dramatically. Her polished composure cracked for just a moment, revealing someone who clearly knew far more about Sarah's deception than she'd initially admitted. She quickly recovered her professional mask, but I'd seen enough to know that Amanda Wells was hiding significant information about my wife's scheme. Amanda's next revelation stunned me into complete silence. She'd suspected Sarah's mental state and potential deception from their very first consultation, weeks earlier, and had secretly recorded all their sessions as legal protection for herself and her practice. These recordings captured Sarah explicitly discussing her amnesia plan, detailing her rehearsal activities, and outlining her strategy for using fake memory loss to achieve favorable divorce terms. The recordings contained damning evidence that could expose Sarah's fraud and potentially result in serious legal consequences, including insurance fraud charges, filing false medical claims, and perjury, if she testified about her condition under oath in court proceedings. Amanda possessed hours of audio documentation proving Sarah's elaborate deception evidence that could completely vindicate me while destroying Sarah's credibility and career prospects permanently. But Amanda's next words revealed her true character and intentions, transforming what should have been justice into something far more sinister. Rather than using these recordings to serve justice or protect her client's legitimate interests, she was leveraging them for personal financial gain through a sophisticated extortion scheme that exploited both spouses in our failing marriage. She offered me what she called a practical solution that would benefit everyone involved. For $100,000 in cash, she would destroy all the recordings while allowing Sarah to proceed with her divorce plans without criminal exposure or public humiliation. Amanda presented this as a humanitarian gesture that would protect a troubled woman from consequences that seemed disproportionate to her crimes, while giving me freedom from a marriage that was clearly beyond repair. Amanda explained her reasoning with chilling casualness that suggested she'd made similar offers before. Sarah's career as an elementary school teacher would be permanently destroyed if news of her deception became public through criminal proceedings or media attention. No school district would ever hire someone who'd fabricated medical conditions and committed insurance fraud, regardless of the underlying circumstances or motivations involved. Her reputation in our community would be shattered beyond repair, affecting not just her professional prospects, but her social relationships and personal credibility for years to come. Amanda suggested that such comprehensive destruction of Sarah's life seemed excessive punishment for what she characterized as a desperate woman's misguided attempt to escape a marriage she believed was already doomed. The attorney presented herself as someone trying to minimize harm for everyone involved, while finding a practical resolution that avoided lengthy court battles and expensive legal proceedings. But her demand for $100,000 revealed the true motivation behind her supposed compassion and humanitarian concerns. Amanda had recognized an opportunity to exploit both spouses in this marriage, extracting maximum financial benefit from our mutual vulnerability and desperation. If I refused her offer, Amanda threatened to make the recordings public through strategic leaks to local media outlets and social media platforms. She claimed this exposure would be devastating, not just for Sarah, but potentially embarrassing for me as the husband who'd failed to recognize his wife's elaborate deception for months. She suggested that public scrutiny might portray me as either incredibly naive or somehow complicit in Sarah's scheme. Amanda's ultimatum forced me into an impossible moral dilemma that challenged everything I believed about justice, forgiveness, and personal responsibility. Paying her demanded silence money would essentially reward Sarah's betrayal while enabling Amanda's extortion, but refusing could result in consequences that would destroy Sarah's life far beyond anything her deception deserved, or what justice required. I found myself in the position of potentially protecting the woman who'd betrayed me while being blackmailed by the attorney who was supposed to be providing her legitimate legal representation. Amanda had transformed from a legal advisor into a predator who specialized in profiting from human misery and relationship destruction during people's most vulnerable moments. As Amanda leaned back in her leather chair, clearly confident in her position of power and certain of my compliance with her demands, I realized I was facing something far more sinister than marital betrayal. This situation involved professional corruption, criminal extortion, and the systematic exploitation of vulnerable people during their most desperate moments by someone sworn to uphold legal and ethical standards. But Amanda's confidence in her extortion scheme would prove to be a critical mistake. She'd underestimated both my determination to seek justice through proper channels and my ability to find allies in unexpected places who could help expose her criminal behavior. Her recorded evidence of Sarah's deception would indeed play a crucial role in resolving this situation, but not in the way she'd planned or anticipated. The next phase of this nightmare would require me to become someone I'd never imagined being a man willing to risk everything to expose corruption and seek justice, even if it meant potentially destroying the woman I'd once loved in the process. Determined to find additional evidence before making any decisions about Amanda's ultimatum, I returned to St. Mary's Hospital with a specific mission that could provide the proof I needed. If Sarah's accident had been deliberately orchestrated as Linda's text messages suggested, then hospital security footage should contain irrefutable proof of coordination between Sarah and the delivery truck driver involved in her supposed accident. I requested a meeting with the hospital's security department during Thursday morning business hours, claiming I needed footage for potential legal proceedings related to my wife's accident and subsequent medical treatment. Robert Hayes, the hospital security chief, initially seemed cooperative and understanding when I explained my request and the importance of documenting the incident for insurance and legal purposes. But as our conversation progressed in his cramped basement office, Robert's behavior became increasingly nervous and evasive in ways that immediately raised my suspicions. He claimed the security system had experienced technical difficulties around the time of Sarah's accident, suggesting that footage might be incomplete or completely unavailable due to equipment malfunctions that hadn't been reported to hospital administration. His explanations seemed rehearsed and unconvincing, delivered with the nervous energy of someone who'd practiced these responses, but wasn't comfortable lying to my face. Robert kept glancing at his computer screen and shuffling papers unnecessarily, displaying classic signs of deception that I'd learned to recognize during my investigation of Sarah's behavior patterns and inconsistencies. While waiting in Robert's office for him to supposedly check on footage availability through his computer system, I noticed several personal photographs displayed on his cluttered desk among stacks of security reports and administrative paperwork. One image immediately caught my attention. Robert posed with a woman at what appeared to be a family gathering, both wearing matching T-shirts for a charity-run event and smiling broadly at the camera. The woman looked remarkably similar to Amanda Wells, though she wore casual athletic clothing instead of the professional business attire I'd seen during our law office meeting. The facial features, hair color, and general build were nearly identical, suggesting either an incredible coincidence or a family relationship that could explain Robert's nervous behavior about the security footage. When Robert returned to his office after several minutes of supposedly checking computer systems in an adjacent room, I casually mentioned recognizing the woman in his photograph and asked if she was a family member. His face went pale immediately, and he quickly turned the picture face down, while claiming it was just a friend from his running club who wasn't important to our current discussion. But his defensive reaction confirmed my growing suspicion. Robert Hayes and Amanda Wells were somehow connected personally, and that connection likely extended to Sarah's accident and subsequent legal proceedings. The nervous energy in Robert's demeanor suggested he was protecting information that could expose a larger conspiracy involving multiple parties working together. I decided to press Robert with more direct questions about the specific details of Sarah's accident to see how much he actually knew about the incident. According to the official police report I'd obtained, Sarah had been struck by a delivery truck making a right turn at the intersection of 5th and Main Street at approximately 2:30 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. The driver had claimed Sarah walked into the crosswalk against the traffic signal. Robert's explanations about the accident became increasingly inconsistent and contradictory as I asked for specific details that any security chief should know about incidents involving their facility. He claimed the truck was traveling at normal speeds, but couldn't explain how Sarah had sustained only minor bruising and a concussion that resulted in a convenient 3-day coma, rather than serious injuries typically associated with pedestrian vehicle collisions. He insisted the delivery driver had been cooperative and professional during police questioning, but couldn't provide the driver's name or company information without additional authorization that would require several days to obtain through hospital administrative channels. These delays seemed designed to prevent me from investigating the driver's background or verifying details of his account. Frustrated by Robert's obvious deception and stonewalling tactics, I contacted Marcus Torres and asked him to investigate any possible connections between Robert Hayes and Amanda Wells using his professional resources and investigative network. Marcus's ability to access information that wasn't available to private citizens could confirm whether my suspicions about their relationship were accurate. Marcus called back within hours with information that exceeded even my suspicious expectations. Robert Hayes and Amanda Wells were siblings who used different surnames for professional reasons, apparently to avoid conflicts of interest in their respective careers. Robert had legally changed his name several years earlier, after a previous incident involving security misconduct at another medical facility that had resulted in his termination and professional sanctions. Amanda had built her legal practice partly by leveraging her brother's access to hospital information and incident reports, creating opportunities for personal injury cases and insurance claims through strategic information sharing that violated patient privacy and professional ethics. Their arrangement had been operating successfully for several years, generating substantial income through carefully managed legal cases that seemed to involve unusual circumstances. Even more shocking, Marcus had discovered that the delivery truck involved in Sarah's accident belonged to Bennett Logistics, a small company that had been investigated multiple times for insurance fraud and suspicious collision patterns. The driver, Tommy Bennett, had been involved in numerous minor accidents over the past 2 years, each resulting in insurance settlements that seemed disproportionate to the actual damages or injuries involved. Tommy was apparently part of a network that specialized in orchestrating low-impact collisions for insurance fraud purposes, working with accomplices to stage accidents that would generate legitimate-looking claims while minimizing actual physical harm to participants. The pattern of his previous incidents suggested professional expertise in creating believable accidents that would pass initial police and insurance investigations. Marcus had also managed to access backup security footage that Robert hadn't mentioned during our meeting. This footage, stored on a separate server system for long-term archival purposes, showed a very different version of events than what appeared in the official accident report that police had filed immediately after the incident. The backup cameras captured Sarah and Tommy Bennett communicating near the intersection approximately 10 minutes before the collision occurred, completely contradicting the official story that they were strangers who'd met through a random accident. The video showed Sarah standing on the sidewalk corner speaking with Tommy through the passenger window of his delivery truck, while both appeared to be discussing timing and positioning for their planned collision. They pointed towards specific areas of the crosswalk, and Tommy nodded in apparent understanding of Sarah's instructions, creating a conversation that lasted nearly 3 minutes and clearly indicated premeditation and coordination rather than a random accident between strangers. This evidence alone would be sufficient to prove insurance fraud and conspiracy charges against both participants. Additional footage revealed even more damning evidence of their coordination. Sarah walked back and forth across the intersection multiple times, apparently practicing her approach and timing, while Tommy repositioned his truck several times, testing different angles and speeds for their planned collision. The final approach showed Sarah deliberately timing her entrance into the crosswalk to coincide with Tommy's turn, creating what appeared to be an accident, but was actually a carefully choreographed performance designed to fool witnesses and investigators. The backup footage also captured the immediate aftermath of the collision, revealing details that contradicted medical reports about Sarah's condition. She remained conscious and alert immediately following the impact, showing no signs of confusion or memory problems that would later characterize her supposed amnesia. She communicated clearly with paramedics, provided accurate personal information, and showed no evidence of the severe head trauma that would supposedly result in her 3-day coma and selective memory loss. Most revealing, the footage showed Robert Hayes arriving at the accident scene within minutes of the collision, despite the fact that hospital security chiefs typically wouldn't respond to external accidents unless specifically requested by emergency services or police. Robert could be seen speaking privately with both Sarah and Tommy before officers arrived, apparently coordinating their stories and ensuring consistency in their accounts to investigators. As Marcus and I reviewed this overwhelming evidence together in his office, the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. Sarah's fake amnesia wasn't just a desperate attempt to escape her marriage based on paranoid suspicions about my inheritance. It was part of a sophisticated fraud operation involving her divorce attorney, the hospital security chief, and a professional insurance fraud driver who specialized in staging accidents for financial gain. Sarah had become entangled with criminals who specialized in exploiting insurance companies and vulnerable individuals for profit, transforming her personal marital crisis into an opportunity for elaborate financial fraud that extended far beyond our relationship problems. Her betrayal was about to expose a much larger network of corruption than anyone had anticipated. But this evidence also provided the leverage I needed to turn the tables on everyone involved in the deception and seek justice through proper legal channels, rather than succumbing to extortion or seeking personal revenge. Armed with overwhelming evidence of conspiracy and fraud involving multiple parties, I made the crucial decision to contact federal law enforcement rather than local police who might have personal or professional connections to the individuals involved in this elaborate scheme. Marcus Torres helped me reach FBI agent Diana Walsh, who specialized in financial crimes and insurance fraud investigations spanning multiple jurisdictions. Agent Walsh immediately recognized the significance of our evidence when Marcus and I presented our findings during a confidential meeting at the federal building downtown. She explained that insurance fraud networks like the one Sarah had become involved with typically operated across multiple states and involved millions of dollars in fraudulent claims annually, making them high-priority targets for federal investigation and prosecution. My case represented an opportunity to expose a larger criminal organization while simultaneously resolving my personal situation through proper legal channels, rather than vigilante justice extortion payments or personal revenge schemes that could compromise any future criminal proceedings. Agent Walsh assured me that federal prosecutors would protect me from legal consequences for my cooperation, and that our evidence would provide sufficient grounds for comprehensive charges against all parties involved. The FBI's plan required me to agree to Amanda Wells's ultimatum while wearing sophisticated recording equipment that would capture her confession and any additional details about the broader fraud network she was operating with her brother and other criminal associates. Agent Walsh explained that federal prosecutors needed recorded admissions of guilt to ensure successful convictions that would withstand appeals and legal challenges. Preparing for the sting operation involved several days of technical setup and rehearsal sessions with FBI technicians and legal specialists who coached me on conversation techniques designed to elicit detailed confessions. They fitted me with virtually undetectable recording devices, including a microphone woven into my shirt fabric and a backup digital recorder disguised as a smartphone case that would capture audio even if the primary device malfunctioned. Agent Walsh coached me extensively on conversation techniques that would encourage Amanda to provide specific details about her criminal activities without using language that might constitute entrapment or compromise the legal validity of our evidence. I practiced maintaining calm demeanor while encouraging Amanda to elaborate on her schemes, ensuring that any confessions would be voluntary and legally admissible in federal court. The meeting with Amanda Wells was scheduled for Friday afternoon at her law office, ostensibly for me to deliver the $100,000 payment she'd demanded in exchange for destroying the recordings of Sarah's sessions. I carried a briefcase containing realistic-looking bank documents and cash bundles provided by the FBI, though the money was actually federal evidence materials designed to appear authentic during initial examination. My instructions were to engage Amanda in detailed conversation about her knowledge of Sarah's deception and any other similar cases she'd handled, encouraging her to elaborate on her methods in criminal network while recording everything for federal prosecutors. Agent Walsh emphasized the importance of letting Amanda volunteer information rather than asking leading questions that could compromise our case. Amanda seemed relaxed and confident when I arrived at her office, clearly believing she'd successfully manipulated me into compliance with her demands while positioning herself for significant financial gain. She offered expensive coffee and made casual small talk about current events before getting down to the business of accepting her extortion payment and discussing our arrangement. As Amanda examined the briefcase contents with obvious satisfaction, I began asking questions designed to elicit detailed admissions about her knowledge of Sarah's case and her recording practices. She freely admitted recording all sessions with Sarah, despite client confidentiality requirements, explaining that she routinely recorded clients who seemed emotionally unstable or potentially deceptive as insurance against future legal challenges. Amanda's confidence grew as she spoke, and she began sharing details about other similar cases she'd handled involving clients who'd engaged in various forms of deception to achieve favorable divorce settlements. She described her recordings as leverage for negotiating additional fees beyond standard legal charges, revealing a pattern of professional misconduct and client exploitation extending far beyond my situation with Sarah. Most damaging to her case, Amanda explicitly described her coordination with her brother Robert at the hospital and their profitable arrangement with Tommy Bennett for orchestrating minor accidents that would support personal injury claims. She explained this as a successful family business that had been operating for several years, generating substantial income through carefully managed insurance fraud schemes involving staged collisions and fake injuries. But our carefully planned sting operation took an unexpected and potentially dangerous turn when Sarah suddenly appeared at Amanda's office without warning. She'd apparently been following me, suspecting that I'd discovered her deception and might be taking action against her interests that could expose her criminal activities and destroy her carefully planned escape from our marriage. Her unannounced arrival threatened to expose the FBI operation and potentially compromise months of investigative work that had gone into building cases against the entire criminal network. Agent Walsh and her surveillance team, monitoring our conversation from a van outside the building, immediately prepared for emergency intervention to protect me and preserve the integrity of our evidence. Instead of maintaining her amnesia performance as I'd expected, Sarah immediately began speaking to Amanda about stopping the recording and protecting their arrangement from whatever investigation I might be conducting. Her desperate intervention revealed several crucial facts that the FBI hadn't previously uncovered through our investigation, providing even more evidence of the conspiracy's scope. Sarah's panicked confession revealed that her involvement in the insurance fraud scheme hadn't been entirely voluntary, as we'd assumed. She'd been blackmailed into participation based on Amanda's discovery of previous criminal activity that Sarah had committed years before our current crisis, making her vulnerable to manipulation and coercion by unethical legal counsel. Sarah admitted that she'd embezzled money from Lincoln Elementary School's fundraising accounts 2 years earlier, stealing donations intended for educational programs and student activities to cover personal expenses during a period of financial stress. Amanda had discovered this embezzlement during routine background research and had threatened to expose Sarah's theft unless she participated in the insurance fraud scheme. Sarah's fake amnesia plan had been Amanda's suggestion, rather than her own idea, designed to create a legal scenario that would generate substantial insurance settlements while providing Amanda with additional blackmail leverage over multiple clients involved in similar schemes. Sarah's cooperation had been motivated by fear of criminal prosecution and career destruction, rather than simple desire to escape our marriage. Agent Walsh and her team, who'd been monitoring our conversation through sophisticated surveillance equipment, immediately moved to arrest all parties involved when Sarah's confession revealed the embezzlement details and confirmed the broader criminal conspiracy. The sting operation had succeeded beyond our expectations, capturing not only Amanda's extortion and insurance fraud, but also evidence of Sarah's previous crimes that provided context for her desperate cooperation. As FBI agents entered Amanda's office and began making arrests with weapons drawn and federal warrants in hand, I felt a complex mixture of relief, satisfaction, and profound sadness about the situation's resolution. Justice was finally being served through proper legal channels, but the woman I'd loved for 5 years was being handcuffed and read her rights for crimes I'd never imagined she was capable of committing. Her betrayal had been even deeper than I'd realized, extending back years before our current crisis and involving the exploitation of children's educational resources for personal gain. The amnesia scheme had been just the latest manifestation of criminal behavior that had apparently characterized Sarah's approach to solving personal problems for years before I'd ever suspected anything wrong. But the most devastating revelation was yet to come, as I learned exactly where Sarah's stolen money had been intended to go and how her crimes had affected some of the most vulnerable members of our community. The FBI arrests of Amanda Wells, Robert Hayes, and Tommy Bennett marked the beginning of a complex legal process that would take months to fully resolve through federal court proceedings. Amanda faced multiple federal charges, including extortion conspiracy to commit insurance fraud and professional misconduct, that could result in permanent disbarment from legal practice and significant prison time. Robert and Tommy were charged with conspiracy and fraud related to their roles in orchestrating fake accidents for insurance purposes. Sarah's legal situation proved more complicated due to the coercive circumstances surrounding her involvement in the insurance fraud scheme that had trapped her in criminal activity. Federal prosecutors acknowledged that Amanda's blackmail had essentially forced Sarah into criminal behavior she might not have otherwise considered, making her both a perpetrator and a victim of the larger conspiracy that had exploited her previous mistakes. However, Sarah still faced serious charges for the original embezzlement that had made her vulnerable to Amanda's manipulation in the first place. The theft of school fundraising money represented a separate crime that couldn't be excused by subsequent coercion, requiring accountability regardless of the circumstances that had led to her current situation with the insurance fraud scheme. During the investigation process that followed the arrests, I learned the full scope of Sarah's embezzlement and its devastating impact on the Lincoln Elementary School community that had trusted her with their charitable contributions. The money she'd stolen over a 2-year period had been collected through various fundraising activities specifically designed to support children battling cancer and other serious illnesses requiring expensive medical treatment. Parents and teachers had organized countless bake sales, car washes, silent auctions, and community events to raise funds for these vulnerable students, believing their contributions would help families facing medical emergencies and crushing financial hardship. Volunteers had donated hundreds of hours organizing these events, while community members had contributed thousands of small donations, trusting that their money would reach children who desperately needed assistance. Sarah had systematically diverted these charitable donations into her personal accounts over many months, or using the money to fund lifestyle expenses and recreational activities, while children in her own school community struggled with medical bills and treatment costs. The stolen funds totaled nearly $15,000, representing an enormous amount of community generosity that had been betrayed and misdirected. Learning about the specific victims of Sarah's embezzlement forced me to confront the moral implications of our entire relationship and my own failure to recognize warning signs. Had there been indicators I'd missed about Sarah's financial anxiety and secretive behavior? Had her guilt about stealing from sick children been influencing her paranoid interpretations of my inheritance secrecy? How many conversations about our financial struggles had been influenced by money she'd stolen from the most vulnerable members of our community? Despite the overwhelming evidence of Sarah's crimes and the depth of her betrayal of both our marriage and her professional responsibilities, I found myself facing an unexpected decision about forgiveness, redemption, and the possibility of healing for everyone affected by her actions. The inheritance from my grandfather that had originally triggered Sarah's paranoid suspicions about my intentions totaled exactly $20,000. After extensive consideration and conversations with victim advocates, federal prosecutors, and my own conscience, I made a decision that surprised everyone involved in the case. I chose to use the inheritance money to fully repay the stolen charity funds, plus additional compensation for the families who'd been affected by Sarah's theft, ensuring that the children's medical needs would finally be met. This decision wasn't made lightly or out of residual romantic feelings for Sarah that might have compromised my judgment. Rather, it reflected my belief that the children who'd been harmed by her crimes deserved immediate assistance, regardless of the legal proceedings that might take months or years to conclude through the court system. The families dealing with pediatric cancer and other medical emergencies couldn't wait for court-ordered restitution that might never materialize. Working with federal prosecutors and victim advocates, I arranged for the inheritance money to be distributed directly to the affected families through the hospital's patient assistance program that specialized in helping families with medical expenses. This approach ensured that the funds would be used for legitimate medical expenses while providing transparency about their source and purpose for everyone involved. Several families were able to immediately cover prescription costs, transportation expenses for treatments, specialized equipment needs, and other medical-related hardships they'd been struggling to afford while waiting for other assistance programs. The relief and gratitude expressed by these families provided a sense of purpose and healing that began to transform my anger and betrayal into something more positive. Sarah's response to my decision surprised everyone involved in the case, including her own defense attorney, who'd advised against any contact between us during legal proceedings. When she learned about my charitable contribution during a plea negotiation meeting, she broke down completely and requested permission to speak directly with me, despite legal advice against any communication that might affect her case. Her genuine remorse and emotional breakdown convinced federal prosecutors that her cooperation in exposing the broader fraud network warranted consideration for reduced charges that would focus on rehabilitation rather than purely punitive measures. Her willingness to testify against Amanda, Robert, and Tommy provided crucial evidence for their prosecutions while demonstrating authentic accountability for her own actions. Through carefully supervised meetings with victim advocates present to ensure propriety, Sarah and I began a series of difficult conversations about accountability, redemption, and the possibility of healing for everyone affected by her actions. Sarah entered into intensive therapy specifically focused on the guilt, shame, and anxiety that had driven her increasingly desperate choices over the years. She also volunteered for extensive community service, specifically working with cancer patient families to understand the real-world impact of her crimes on actual people rather than abstract victims. This direct contact with families struggling with medical crises helped her comprehend the human cost of her embezzlement in ways that legal proceedings alone couldn't provide. The legal resolution took 8 months to fully conclude through federal court proceedings and plea negotiations. Amanda Wells received a federal prison sentence of 4 years and permanent disbarment from legal practice in all states. Robert Hayes was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison and permanently banned from security work at any medical facilities. Tommy Bennett received 18 months and was required to surrender his commercial driving license permanently. Sarah's cooperation with federal investigators and her genuine efforts at making amends resulted in a plea agreement that avoided prison time in favor of 3 years probation. Extensive community service requirements specifically focused on cancer patient assistance and mandatory participation in financial accountability counseling designed to address the underlying issues that had led to her criminal behavior. She resigned from her teaching position but was eventually able to find meaningful work with a nonprofit organization that provides educational support services to hospitalized children and their families. Her personal experience with guilt and redemption made her particularly effective at helping other people navigate difficult circumstances while maintaining ethical boundaries and personal accountability. Over the course of the following year, Sarah and I participated in couples counseling focused on rebuilding trust and communication, rather than simply attempting to resume our marriage as if nothing had happened. We learned that both of us had contributed to the breakdown in our relationship through poor communication, financial secrecy, and failure to address underlying anxieties that had created vulnerability to external manipulation. The inheritance money from my grandfather became the foundation for a permanent charitable scholarship program, supporting children affected by cancer and other serious illnesses in our school district and surrounding communities. Sarah's volunteer work with cancer patient families grew into a passionate advocacy role that eventually led to her full-time employment with the nonprofit organization that had initially provided her with work during her probation period. 18 months after the arrests and legal proceedings began, Sarah and I made the carefully considered decision to renew our wedding vows in a small ceremony attended by family members and several of the families we'd worked with through the scholarship program. Our renewed commitment was based on genuine forgiveness, mutual understanding of our failures and growth, and shared dedication to using our experience to help others facing similar challenges. The scholarship program funded by my grandfather's inheritance has now assisted over 50 families dealing with pediatric medical emergencies, providing financial support for treatments, medications, travel expenses, and other needs that insurance doesn't cover. Sarah's work with cancer patient advocacy has helped establish support programs in schools throughout our region, ensuring that other families won't face the isolation and financial desperation that can lead to desperate choices. Our story demonstrates that even the most painful betrayals and elaborate deceptions can become opportunities for growth, redemption, and service to others when people are willing to face their mistakes honestly and commit to making amends through concrete action rather than empty promises. Sometimes the most important lessons about love, trust, and forgiveness come through surviving experiences that initially seem to destroy everything we believed about our relationships and ourselves. The journey from betrayal to redemption taught us that healing requires more than just forgiveness between individuals. It requires commitment to repairing the broader damage that our actions have caused in our community, taking responsibility for the people who've been hurt by our choices, and transforming our pain into service that helps others avoid similar mistakes. Have you ever faced a situation where someone you loved betrayed your trust in ways that seem unforgivable? And how did you navigate the difficult balance between seeking justice and offering forgiveness? Share your thoughts in the comments below about how you've handled betrayal and whether you believe redemption is possible even after elaborate deceptions. If this story resonated with your own experiences or helped you think differently about forgiveness and second chances, please like this video and subscribe for more true stories about overcoming life's most challenging moments. Don't forget to share this with friends who might benefit from hearing about the power of transformation and the possibility that even our darkest moments can become sources of healing and hope. Thank you for listening to this difficult but ultimately hopeful journey, and remember that even when trust has been shattered completely, there's always potential for rebuilding something stronger and more honest, when we choose courage over fear and compassion over revenge.